by M.R. Rangaswamy in San Francisco, who is a successful investor and entrepreneur. And there are three verticals that we focus on. One of them is philanthropy and social impact, which is most germane to today's program. We also are a platform to facilitate entrepreneurship and innovation. And then lastly, we foster nonpartisan political and community engagement. There are also two initiatives that we have in Diaspora that are horizontals that cut across everything that we do. One of them is our Diaspora Next initiative, through which we engage the younger generation in our activities. And the second is our Global Connect program, through which we connect diaspora leaders with each other across many different countries, and then to India as well. Our overall mission at Indiaspora is to position the global Indian diaspora as a force for good. And as part of that, we decided to launch a series of lists of prominent Indian diaspora and residents in India. The first list was a business leaders list that we launched last year, where there were 65 CEOs of Indian origin who were part of the diaspora, and they were at Fortune 500 or Forbes 2000 companies. We put them on a list and held an event with them where we talked about how they're using their success in business to advance the social good. We followed that up earlier this year with a government leaders list. Not only are there more than 70 people of Indian origin in the Biden administration here in America, but also there are over 200 people of Indian origin in very senior positions in governments worldwide across a variety of different countries, in positions like central bank head, chief justice, cabinet ministers, and indeed even heads of state. And we held another event with them. Now today, we are launching the Philanthropy Leaders List. The Philanthropy Leaders List is not meant to be a ranking, but rather a celebration of the top Indian diaspora and Indian resident philanthropists. The overall goal is to increase the level of giving by diaspora and people in India. For example, Indian Americans alone have an annual giving potential of about $3 billion, as Indiaspora found in a survey that we conducted with Dahlberg in 2018. So what does the Indiaspora Philanthropy Leaders List do? It showcases change makers around the globe, and there are 100 Indian and diaspora philanthropic leaders on the list. Most importantly, at a time like this, it pays tribute to philanthropists who are dedicating themselves to COVID relief. The geographic reach of the Indiaspora Philanthropy Leaders List is wide. Earlier today, about 12 hours ago, we held an event that was focused on the Western Hemisphere with philanthropists in Canada and the UK and the United States primarily. Now, this event is more geared to the Eastern Hemisphere time zones, and we have folks from Dubai and the UAE, India, of course, Singapore, and even Australia. As you can see from this distribution, a lot of the philanthropists on this list are from America and India and the UK. And then there are significant amounts in Singapore, the UAE, and Canada, some in Australia as well. Through this process, we were aided by a fantastic set of jurors. And you see them on your screen. You'll hear from some of them today. These jurors are eminent professionals in the philanthropy space or connected to it in every different geography from where this Philanthropy Leaders List pulls people. Let me now pause for a second and show you the website. We'll scroll down the website of the Philanthropy Leaders List. It's available at lists.indiaspora.org. Again, that's lists.indiaspora.org. So what are the different areas that our philanthropists focus on? Indeed, the areas are as wide and as differing and as diverse as the philanthropists on the list themselves. You see some of them on your screen. There's disability rights, education, food insecurity, humanitarian aid, water and sanitation, rural development, just to name a few. Let's talk a little bit about what the program today will entail. We'll start with a keynote address about accelerating philanthropy in India. Then we'll have a panel discussion on philanthropy's role in crisis and responding to COVID, supporting the long-term recovery. We'll follow that up with our second keynote address about how philanthropy can empower rural India. And then finally, we'll have a roundtable about what India needs now, an on-the-ground update and opportunities for philanthropic engagement. I'd encourage the panelists and the speakers to stick around because at the end, we'll have a Q&A session. With that, it gives me tremendous pleasure, and it's such a great honor to officially and formally launch the 2021 Indiaspora Philanthropy Leaders List.
The Indian diaspora's presence can be seen in every sector of society, positively impacting the global community and leaving an undeniable footprint in the philanthropic ecosystem. Tackling issues such as healthcare inequality, food insecurity, lack of educational resources, and gender inequality.
I really do think that the philanthropist receives as much as he or she gives.
The Indian community has tremendous philanthropic potential, and we see the next decade as a very important time for elevating its level of giving.
All you need to do is to take a few minutes and give to your favorite cause.
Philanthropy is specific and unique to the philanthropist. Whether it's through direct personal giving or amplifying giving through community engagement and partnerships, every philanthropist thinks about giving in a way that aligns with their personal journey, philosophy, and goals. The Indiaspora Philanthropy Leaders List recognizes and celebrates these leaders. In this last year of uncertainty and concern, our community has proven that we are able to tackle a diverse set of needs through tremendous generosity and innovation. The recent increases in giving prove that it is truly a transformative moment for Indian philanthropy. Indiaspora is proud to shine a spotlight on these exceptional philanthropists of the Indian diaspora.
I first want to applaud the 100 people on the list. They're such change makers and inspirational leaders for the Indian diaspora as well as Indians. Hello, everyone. This is M.R. Rangaswamy, the founder of Indiaspora. I'm pleased to be here with you today and also to tell you about a bold, audacious goal that Indiaspora has set for itself, and we seek all your help to fulfill this dream and objective. And that is to double the giving and impact of the diaspora as well as Indians in the next 5 years. This will only take a 15% increase in our giving over the next 5 years to make this happen. And I hope these philanthropic leaders, as well as everyone watching this program, will make that a reality today. I'm here to introduce our first keynote. He doesn't need a big introduction, but I'm going to embarrass him a little bit. I first met him when he was pitching me his private equity and venture fund when he was living in the US, planning to come to India. And he started this fund. And little did I imagine that he would not only move back to India, but then become a philanthropist that all of us admire. He first started the Central Square Foundation, then played a major role in starting Ashoka University, but also many, many other organizations. Ashish Dhawan has been such a key person and a catalyst in spawning new organizations, in increasing capacity, in opening up new avenues for philanthropy in India. And so without further ado, I would like to welcome Ashish to turn on his video and join us for his opening keynote, where he's going to discuss how we can increase the philanthropic giving in India. Hello, Ashish. Welcome.
Thank you, MR. It's an honor to be invited here. I've known you for 20 plus years, and it's incredible to see the work that Indiaspora is doing, and an honor to be on this list. I have a presentation that I'll run through, but I wanted to start by saying that I'm very excited at the prospects of what's happening in India and with the diaspora. I think the philanthropy has been an essential part of India for centuries, but we're at a seminal moment where wealth has been crystallized to a great extent in the last decade or two, and we always had leaders like the Tatas who've been giving for decades, but given the number of first-generation wealth creators in India and around the world, we're seeing such an upsurge in philanthropic giving in the more recent past. And I do want to point out that I think particularly Mr. Premji's commitment in India is really the equivalent to what Andrew Carnegie and Rockefeller did in the US about 100 years ago, which sort of catalyzed the whole philanthropic movement in the US. And I think Mr. Premji has done the same in India. And folks like Nandan have shown us how he can be so innovative and so creative and work at such scale to make things happen. So frankly, these are two great role models we have. And so many other people like Ronnie and Anu and others who are involved in this program as well. So I'd like to request for the slides that I have to be pulled up and run you through some of my thoughts. The next slide, please. So, I mean, clearly there's the opportunity for strategic giving, strategic philanthropy, and this can be a real driver for economic and social transformation in India. India is still just a $2.5 trillion economy. Our per capita income's only $2,000. But the state does spend now almost $300 billion on development expenditure. This is largely spent by state governments in India. So philanthropy will always be a drop in the bucket compared to what government spends, that $300 billion of development expenditure. And so really my belief is that the best philanthropy needs to be flexible, innovative, and yet audacious to attempt system change, to really attempt to make that 300 billion more effective, to come up with new ideas, which government can't do because it's a behemoth, to create an ecosystem in terms of partnerships and working with others, and really to take a long-term view in terms of shaping the agenda, supporting organizations and organization building. And there's a real opportunity to do that in the Indian context, given that we have so many problems that are yet to be solved, whether it's in education, health, or many other areas. The next slide, please. My own journey just started about a decade ago, and I've learned so much over this period of time. As MR mentioned, really spent most of my time with Ashoka and CSF, but in the last 3 years, I've also created a few other organizations. And now my own plan over the next 10, 15 years is to take a much more focused approach to building more institutions and foundations in key areas of economic growth, creating greater opportunity for all, and a thriving global South ecosystem. By that, I mean that one of the things I've realized is a great opportunity for us to learn from other developing emerging countries where conditions are similar to India, and for India to lead the world with its development model. Given that I believe that the Chinese state, given that it lacks a civil society sector, the way India has one, we have a real opportunity to lead the emerging world in terms of not just philanthropic giving, but also role models for development. The next slide, please. I believe it's a moment for us to look at accelerating philanthropy in India. MR has set a goal of doubling philanthropy. I think that's very achievable. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of wealth has gotten crystallized. A lot of philanthropists are choosing to give later in life. I personally left my corporate career in my early 40s. And even if people don't leave their corporate career, most people will stay. I do see now, I mean, we've seen it in the context of Ashoka. We have 150 plus founders, donors. Many of them are in their 40s and 50s. They've just written meaningful check. And I believe if they're encouraged, we can see them start to give more, give sooner, and give better. And that's the real opportunity I see in the Indian context. The next slide, please. There are many initiatives in India that have helped spur giving. Anu and I have been involved with the India Philanthropy Initiative led by Mr. Premji, and it's done a great job in terms of educating philanthropists, bringing philanthropists together to share knowledge and just encourage more people to start giving. There are also organizations like Basra, GiveIndia, many others that have worked on spurring the to the philanthropic ecosystem. I'm working on a new initiative as well called AIP, along with a couple of other philanthropists, where the idea really is to further spur philanthropy and to do this in a very structured manner, much like a wealth management firm, where there are senior resources working on philanthropic advisory for HNIs in particular and UHNIs. And we build, I still believe we need lots of frameworks, case studies, and more networks to be created. So I think there's more to be done, particularly to encourage first-time givers, some of the givers in their 40s and 50s, etc. The next slide, please. I think there's great degree to be learned from people who've come ahead of us. Obviously, the Tatas have created a number of great institutions in India, from the Indian Institute of Science to TIFR, TIS, Tata Memorial Center, the NCPA, etc., etc. And they're running wonderful programs to this date. I do want to point out, Andrew Carnegie, who was the richest person in the world at one point in time, and then hung up his boots and really dedicated the last part of his life to philanthropy, and famously said that he who dies rich dies disgraced. And what a lot of you may not know, that he actually created about 20 institutions in his lifetime, and the Carnegie Foundation continues to do incredible work. This is just a list of a few of the institutions, but there are really about 20 that he created. And I think there's a real opportunity for many philanthropists in India to not just run programs, but build a variety of different institutions that have a lasting effect in terms of economic and social transformation. There are so many institutional voids to be filled. There's so much that can be done at the early stages in terms of getting these institutions up and running. And there are more leaders and there's more talent coming to the sector to really build these high quality institutions. So much like what Carnegie did, and what I'll show you, just if you could turn to the next slide. The Rockefeller Foundation also, I've been studying a little bit of the history of philanthropy, some incredible work. Many of you may not know that the Green Revolution, which actually hit India, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, a lot of the research that was done in Mexico, elsewhere, was actually funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. Similarly, the early work in this education in the southern part of the US through the Global Education Board by the Rockefeller, and many other such programs. The Ford Foundation came later, has done some really catalytic work. So there's a lot for us to learn from these institutions and to be inspired. And I think this is a seminal moment where philanthropists should not only accelerate the giving, but also be really audacious to think, can we be inspired by the Tatas, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Fords, to do something similar in the Indian context, which is to build institutions that will last and to drive catalytic programs that will get the state to perform better in terms of delivering essential development services in the Indian context. And so I'm personally very excited about doing much more myself in the next 15 years and really working alongside many others who are embarking on this journey. Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to listening to my fellow co-panelists.
Thank you so much, Ashish, for this inspiring message. Great to hear about your new initiative to accelerate Indian philanthropy by promoting Indian philanthropists to give more, give sooner, and give better. I think we should all be excited about the next few years, maybe even the next couple of decades, because they present a great opportunity for higher levels of strategic giving from Indian philanthropists. Also, thank you for sharing your journey and catalyzing social change with all the institution building work that you and your team at the foundation have done. Really appreciate your participation at our launch event. Thanks a lot. My name is Ashish Shah, and I am the Senior Director of Philanthropy at Indiaspora. I'm delighted to announce our next panel discussion. The panel is titled Philanthropy's Role in Crisis, Responding to COVID-19 and Supporting Long-Term Recovery. The broad objective of this panel is to have our panelists reflect and provide their perspective on the role that philanthropy has played and continues to play in responding to the pandemic, and discuss some ways that we can sustain this momentum in the long run. I'm excited to introduce the panel for this session. We have Anand Deshpande joining us from India, Anand is a longtime Indiaspora member and founder, chairman, and managing director of Persistent Systems. We also have Anu Aga joining us from India. Anu is the former chairperson of Thermax and founder, trustee of Teach for India. Anand and Anu are both featured on our Philanthropy Leaders List. We also have Vikram Khanna joining us from Singapore. Vikram is the associate editor and economic affairs commentator at the Straits Times in Singapore, and one of our esteemed jurors who helped us with this list. And finally, to moderate this panel, we are delighted to have Abhishek Sharma, who is the CEO of Foundation Holdings. Abhishek is joining us from Dubai, and he is also one of our jurors who has offered us incredible support that has helped us put this list together. So welcome everyone. And Abhishek, let me turn this over to you.
Good morning from Dubai. Hopefully everyone's doing well. I had the privilege of going to the University of Pennsylvania, and the alma mater or the founder of that university is Benjamin Franklin. A quote he often had used was, "A man wrapped up in himself makes a very small bundle." Now, at that point, hopefully it edited it a man or woman, but hopefully the point is clear. It's my pleasure today to welcome Mrs. Anuaga, Mr. Anand, as well as Mr. Vikram. It really is an honor. The way to kick it off, I just have 3 rapid fire questions, if that's okay with everyone. What does philanthropy actually mean to each of you? How did you arrive at your philanthropic priorities? And when did you get serious about philanthropy? So if I could please turn it to Mrs. Anu, just to please kick this off.
To me, philanthropy is not just about giving money. It is about money, but it's also your skill and your time. It is relatively easy to write out a check. But I have seen that in Teach for India, the young graduates and professionals who are outstanding quality give 2 years of their time. And to me, that is also philanthropy, because later as alums, they change the landscape of social enterprise. Do you want me to go ahead with other answers, or wait?
Yes, please. Yes, Ms. Anu.
What made me take education as the sector? I was wanting to give at one stage and was looking for a credible NGO, and everyone pointed at Shaheen Mystery, and her enthusiasm rubbed on me and my daughter, and that's how we have taken education as a sector. And now we realize it's one of the most important sectors if India wants to develop and grow, along with health. And what was the third one?
Is there a moment, or when did you actually get serious about philanthropy?
It's a personal thing. My son, who died at a young age, was very keen that substantial part of our income should go towards philanthropy. And after his death, we started in a very serious way. And over time, it grew. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. If I could turn it to Mr. Anand, please.
Hi, thanks. First, I'm humbled and honored to be part of this list. And thank you, Indiaspora, for including me. I have been looking at philanthropy more as, something that we can make a difference. And the reason I do it is partly because it makes me feel good. More than the people who you give to, you do it for yourself. And that's what is very exciting. I've been doing, most of my personal philanthropy has been around helping entrepreneurship happen at the low end. So we work with a lot of urban services businesses, trying to help them to scale. So the very small 5 lakhs to 1 crore of businesses. And this is something we run through our family foundation called Diaspora Foundation. And the idea is to make sure that small businesses succeed, because that's really where the action is. And that is the place where we can really make things happen. The whole principle behind that was that if every person in a family earns enough money to make sustainable long-term ongoing living, then all the other things they can afford to pay for and feel good about doing it. So that was the reason for going after that. We started about 7 years back, more along, and decided that a friend of mine, and we have been talking about this for a long time, about the point of, learn, earn, and return. And after I turned 50, I was sort of thinking about it, and I sort of couldn't figure out for 3 more years. And then, about 7 years back, I sort of decided that it was time to at least start this activity. Thankfully, things had a team, and things have gone well after that.
Thank you, Anand. If I could turn it just to Mr. Vikram, please. I believe,
yeah. Sorry. Well, thank you for including me in this program. I'm not in the league of some of the philanthropists, but nevertheless, I might have a few thoughts to share. As to the first question of what philanthropy means, I mean, it's a very good question, because I think philanthropy means different things to different people, and even to philanthropists themselves. So you have, for example, the Gates Foundation approach to philanthropy is to save as many lives at as low a dollar cost as possible. So that's why they support initiatives such as childhood immunization, malaria eradication, HIV, sanitation, and so on, which have a huge payoff in terms of lives saved at relatively low cost. Then you have George Soros, for example, who's a completely different approach. He believes that for the betterment of societies, you need to change political systems, root and branch. So that's why he's supported progressive movements in repressed countries in Eastern Europe, Myanmar, and so on. So, and other philanthropists have their pet causes, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's children, people with disabilities, etc., etc. From my own view is that philanthropy is basically about filling gaps, about doing things that the governments are not doing or not doing enough, and also creating institutions that are not created by the state. I think as Mr. Dhawan alluded. But effective philanthropy is not just about giving and being generous. It's also about professionalism. It's also about monitoring outcomes. It's about forging partnerships, ensuring transparency, and doing things that catalyze more giving. And I think these are what a lot of the foundations that Mr. Dhawan described. I think these are things that they have done. They have built, the philanthropic body has itself become an institution. So that's it, yeah. So that's, as for my own involvement, it's been limited. I do have a resort in Bali, in Indonesia, and we support children in the neighboring schools. So we adopt a child and see him through his entire education. And I've sat on the board of Singapore's oldest arts center called the Substation, which is basically totally dependent on donations, both from government and private individuals. And my basic role was to go with a begging bowl in hand to corporations and donors to support this institution, to support the arts. So yeah, so that's my limited journey.
Thank you. That's helpful. So, I guess at least in this part of the world, we've been referring to COVID with the DC and AD lens, pre-COVID and post-COVID. So if I again turn it back to you, Mrs. Anu, just what have you felt with COVID in terms of the impact and the changes which are coming for philanthropy? Again, your own personal lens, but also in your cohort, how are people treating this, and that any guidance and any views would be welcome.
Sure. When COVID hit us first, we were in a dilemma. We support a certain set of NGOs. And should we sort of cut down on what we give to them and give to COVID? And then we realized that none of the NGOs, especially education, you can cut down. You have to increase, in fact. So it was give to your regular NGOs plus and give to the cause of COVID. And when we saw the images of the migrant workers during the first lockdown, we realized these are the people we haven't thought of for, and we need to reach out to them for basics like food. And so COVID opened our eyes to many areas where we were blind to. And I think we cannot forget these, and this will have to be a long-term giving for certain causes.
Thank you. Mr. Anand, please.
Yeah, I'd like to extend from what Anu said. And I think one of the things that I noticed during COVID, which was very encouraging in some sense, is that many givers, including individuals and companies, came together and thought of working their philanthropic donations together rather than doing our own individual, whatever we might be doing. And I was very encouraged at the support and the excitement that got created out of that. And Anu and I are both part of Pune, and the chamber was very active in some of these activities. And it was very heartening to see individuals, companies, and everyone else coming together with government to really channelize efforts to support the COVID cause in some sense. So we were not just donating on our own cause, but together as a platform. And I thought that impact was very good. And I believe that we should learn from this. And for some of the other things, creating a mission that includes many people, whether it's corporates, individuals, and all of us, and doing impact can really give us long-term returns and results. So I'm really excited about the experiment that got forced upon us because of COVID, but looking forward, this is something we should extend. Just on COVID further along, I think we are still not done on maybe the basic infrastructure for healthcare may have been a little bit better than what it is. But I think the biggest challenge that comes ahead is the livelihoods and the businesses that have suffered. I work very closely with very small businesses, and I can say that all of them are hurting very poorly. They have not had steady customers for many, many months now. And I think we really need to do something to rebuild these businesses, because that is the essential infrastructure for our country.
Mr. Vikram, any thoughts?
Yes, I mean, as tracking the crisis as a journalist, I think one of the things is this is a unique kind of crisis. It's not a national crisis. It's not even a series of national crises. It is actually a global crisis. So I think the most effective philanthropy really has been that which has a global dimension. So, for example, the efforts to expand vaccine production capacity across the world, the whole COVAX thing, I think that those have been very important in this crisis. As far as India and developing countries are concerned, I think the crisis has brought out the importance of primary healthcare systems. I think this has been very, very neglected in many of these countries. In India, for example, a lot of communities were left to their own devices. They had to depend on the local pharmacist or whatever it is to treat people. Of course, he didn't have the knowledge, or he didn't know what to do. And I think this is an underfunded area. It gets about half of what education gets. And I think this is a priority going forward. And also, I think Anu had mentioned a lot of the people who fall between the cracks, the migrant workers, the people who we never think of, people in jails, for example, people with mental illness, for example. Mental illness was underfunded even before the COVID crisis. It's even worse now. And finally, I think COVID has highlighted the importance of supply chains. I think this is, the delivering critical items, all the critical items that are needed are part of complex supply chains, even the vaccines themselves. And I think any philanthropic effort has to come to grips with this issue. So I think one of the interesting things here in Singapore that we've observed is that a group of IIM alumni sort of pooled their supply chain expertise together. And they mapped all the global supply chains needed to procure essential items. And then they made partnerships with last mile partners in India and were able to do this. So I think this crisis has brought out the importance of mastering how the supply chain works in order to deliver help. So that's what I've observed.
Thank you. Just taking a step back, Mr. Nanu, in terms of aspiring philanthropists, I guess really the youth of today, what advice would you have for some of the younger generation who are aspiring or looking forward to get really into philanthropy from your own journey? Any guidance, any advice for the futures?
Yeah, I would say, as Anand said, in giving, you receive far more. My life has been enriched when the children from Akanksha and Teach for India come to my place and I see things through their eyes, For example, when they came to my house, they said, this is a boot khana. This means such a big house, how can you live alone? And when you go to the house and you see a small place where 8 people are living, it hits you. So through their lens, you could see things. So I would tell the young people, get involved in a cause you enjoy doing something. First, try out different things to see where your passion is. Select that cause and go deep into it, and your life will definitely be enriched. That would be mine.
Thank you. Anand?
No, I agree with what Anu said, and I just reinforce what I mentioned in the previous question as well, that I think we can all make a difference if we all work together. And I think philanthropy and personal funds or companies putting in CSR money has certain benefits that we're not constrained by some of the other things that the governments may be constrained by. And we can take more ambitious and exciting projects or look at more exciting problems to solve in some way or the other. And I'm quite excited. I feel that this is a good opportunity for all of us to work together. And I think we can inspire other people. We can inspire each other to do more. And I'm very excited as I look forward.
Vikram?
Yeah, I mean, on inspiring young people, I think young people are not in a financial position to sort of be philanthropists themselves. So I think the journey for a young person should start with volunteerism. I mean, to volunteer for activities, or to even to invest their skills, whatever skills they have. I think it's striking in India that actually there are children as young as 10 years old who have deployed their skills to help others. I mean, there's people who set up routers and so on in schools to enable digital learning. There are the young people who created WhatsApp groups to provide information and data and connect people who need help with whatever government agencies exist and so on. So I think that those are the routes for young people to volunteer and to invest whatever skills they have.
Thank you. One last question I have for the panelists here. I recently watched, and maybe I was late to this, is Inside Bill's Brain, Decoding Bill Gates. There was a good documentary, right? And it shows the joys, but also the challenges of his own journey, whether it's public health or I think some of the public sanitation efforts. What came across is, of course, you need determination to keep going, often working with government. So the question here is for the panelists, what has been the single biggest challenge, and how have you tackled it in your own philanthropic journey? And again, I'll start with Ms. Anu in this case.
Well, when I first got involved with the NGOs, I was a little immature and didn't know how to deal with the government because they didn't keep the commitments they made. They didn't turn up for meetings. Their way of working was so different from our professional way of working that I used to say working with government is a spiritual experience. Because if you don't have the patience, your blood pressure will go up and you will not be able to manage. But later, when I realized the constraints they have, the problems they face, I was more empathetic and learned to build on this relationship. Because if you want to scale up anything, no NGO can do by itself. You need government as a partner. So I have learned that the greatest challenge can become your asset if you know how to deal with them. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Anand? Anand, I believe you're on mute.
Sorry. No, all of us have a lot of learning. We have been experimenting a lot at the Diaspora Foundation, and I wouldn't say it's been challenging, it's been interesting as well. But I think if I'm looking forward to working and seeing what Ashish is doing to learn how to do this a little better than what we are. Probably we are not very efficient in the way we are organized right now. But I would, I think we can do a lot more and a lot better looking ahead. And that's sometimes a cause of frustration and a challenge.
Thank you. Vikram?
Yeah, people in India are better placed to talk about this situation, but I think while a lot of philanthropic organizations have managed to work with NGOs, there are still a lot of challenges. I mean, India has a government that does not seem to be very NGO friendly. I mean, we have this Foreign Contributions Regulation Act, this FCRA, which is quite a hurdle for a lot of NGOs. They have to get registered and so on. And a lot of them have had their registrations cancelled. So I think you have to work around these kind of bureaucratic issues, especially for foreign funding. There's also restrictions on re-granting. So, for example, if if one NGO is registered, it can't re-grant it can't subcontract to another NGO, which is sometimes necessary, in India. So I think you really do need to revisit this FCRA Act, and meanwhile there should be waivers for registration, at least in times of crisis and so on. And I think the point was also mentioned earlier: the NGOs in India lack managerial capacity. They don't really monitor outcomes. Their boards, the people from corporate India do not sit on the boards of NGOs. They don't have that kind of capacity. So it's important to not just fund causes, but to fund the NGOs organizationally, to make sure they are resilient, that they have built some financial reserves, that they have some sort of organizational strength. I think that should also be a focus of philanthropy, in order to sort of make the whole ecosystem work better.
Thank you. That's insightful. Well, at least the panel has been heartwarming to hear. It's been engaging. So I just want to thank each one of you for taking the time, and congratulations and good luck on the journey ahead.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. Great to hear you moderate this very inspiring panel with Anu, with Vikram and Anand. I want to thank every one of you who have been on this list as well, the initial 100 list. Hello again, everyone. This is M.R. Rangaswamy, and I have the pleasure of introducing our next keynote, who, again, doesn't need much introduction. All he did in his past was to pioneer a cable TV operation, start one of India's largest toothbrush companies, as well as be known as one of the 75 most influential people in the 21st century. This is what he did in the first innings. In the second innings, he co-founded a global edtech leader, Upgrad, which has impacted over 1 million learners across the world. And now, along with his wife, they're co-founders for the nonprofit Swades Foundation, which is committed to empowering 1 million lives in rural India. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Ronnie Skruala. Ronnie, the floor is yours. If you can unmute yourself and turn your video on, we'll be ready to go. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for having me here. I like panel discussions because they're always a lot more diverse views. And I think given the onerous task of talking to all of you who've pretty much been there and done that for 10 minutes. So I just had a few sort of headline thoughts. Firstly, thank you for conferring us with an honor at this award ceremony too. But that just brought me to my first thought. When I first sort of got the mail, I just thought, when you're giving back, which in itself is such a personal thing, and is it something that really needs that kind of an award? Is awards even a relevant area when you're giving back and when it's something that's so personal? I think that's just food for thought. I did kind of reconcile to the fact that I think more and more forums like this, and maybe awards like this and recognition like this, encourage different people at different levels. But it also evangelizes what we all really want to do, so that more and more people feel the need to do that. So I just think it's a question of when you're looking to award in an area which is so personal, is that something that needs to be positioned in really the right manner? And I think we have, but I just want to leave that thought with everyone here. The second really is, and I heard the previous panel too, I mean, philanthropy right now for me personally, it's a large word. And the reason I say it's a large word is because it just it just reeks of you need to be evolved, you need to be at a certain age, you need to have a certain bank balance. And that kind of eliminates a lot of people thinking, aha, okay, I should put this down of when I'm at this age and I'm at this stage. But I think what we want to do at this forum and other forums is really need to see how inclusive everyone is to that. So somewhere down the line, even without recoining the phrase philanthropy, is it everyone's onus here to actually position this as a much more all generations part of it, and not something that you need to cut big checks on or need to have the resources for. And I think some of the panelists previously also mentioned that. My daughter started her own NGO. And right now it's a mentoring and mentee program. There isn't much of a cost. There isn't much of an investment. It's everyone's time. Nobody's donating. Her corpus fund is minimum. But the impact that it's having, because there are 700 mentors and 700 mentees, is absolutely incredible. So I think just a sort of a review on how do we make the word philanthropy a lot more accessible and a lot more, what does it mean for me? And I can also do that, versus a pedestal approach to how we treat philanthropy, something that I think we all need to kind of think about. Third, I have to say that I'm not a very good fan of pledging and this public announcement that everyone makes on pledging, and controversial as that may sound, that's just something, again, I want to put forward. I know it kind of is a prompt for other people to do that, but I think it also sometimes acts in the reverse way. And a little bit of what I mentioned on the big word of philanthropy, that if you suddenly have people who are saying, I'm pledging, and then the amount, it kind of alienates 99 out of 100 people who feel, aha, this is not necessarily for me. So I think, again, for a forum like this, where all of us are people who participate in advocacy, participate in actually evangelizing this, is this something, when we're looking at the element of pledging, what do we want to communicate? So I think these are the three sort of broad points I wanted to start up with. Just awards is very, very important, but how do we position that, especially in a very personalized thing like giving in? What do we need to do to make the word philanthropy actually very accessible and identifiable, not to age groups, but to anyone of any social economic status? And I think the third one is just the element of pledging, and how positive is that versus what does it make it sound and extremely alienating for a lot of people. Moving on to our personal experience that my wife Zarina and I looked at, I can only say firsthand, we started our NGO at that time, which was called Share, when we were both in our 20s, late 20s. Okay, and it was like we had a 10,000 square foot rented office, but we felt 1,000 square foot of that we could give to a mobile crash, a little bit of an orphanage, and a little bit of an old age home. And that became the culture of the company, because that was the office. Almost the 30 people that grew to 300 people then started identifying with that. And that's why I feel so strongly that today we need to make this a lot more accessible. The way I see giving back, I think of it as two ways. And this is something that I've learned for the last 5 to 6 years. Either you're a catalyst or it's something that's very personal. And let me explain both. When I'm a catalyst, it means that it is something that I want to do, but half of what I'm doing, and I think to a certain extent we define, Zarina and I define how we look at Swades as being personal and being a catalyst. And I think that's just my entrepreneurial days that have taught you that, because you look at that, but after a certain stage, even as an entrepreneur or as a leader, you are then being a catalyst for multiple other people. And how do you bring that into the NGO space, the philanthropy space, the foundation space? And what do I mean by that? There's a lot of the vision that we state out personally. But by also playing the catalyst role, we then involve multiple other foundations, a lot of people from CSR donations, and suddenly you can look at scale. Because I think we all understand one thing in India: when you need to solve any problem at any level, the first word that comes to our mind is solving it at scale. That doesn't mean that you need to be intimidated, and that doesn't mean for many people that says, no, but I'm just doing it in one school or one village or 10 kids. Of course it is. But for all of us, I think it's very, very important that when we are here as leaders, that we look at solving problems at scale. And so I just want to leave that thought with you, that how do we, in everything that we do in our NGO foundation personal, play a dual role of it being personal, your vision, your push, your identification, but also being a catalyst. So lastly, I'd just like to describe in a very brief element the Swades Foundation model. Around 2013, 2014, when both Zarina and I were discussing how we can evolve this model to a much more scalable model, we met with tons and tons of NGOs, individuals, etc. And finally, we settled on a model where we felt is something we wanted to do, but we can also evangelize and catalyze that. And I think the summary of that one was, number one, that we wanted a concentric geography where it was all interconnected. So we took 5, 6, and now 7 blocks in a particular state, and the entire geography of 2,200 villages were covered. Second, with a lot of naysayers, we also approached it with the fact that we wanted to impact the entire village in all aspects, from water and sanitation and education and health to livelihood. And we had a lot of naysayers, but I think in the long run, it's paid out, albeit with a lot of learning as we go forward. And the last thing I would like to say here today for all of us, outside of the word of philanthropy, what we want to do with pledging, why is catalyst as important as personal is finally, as leaders, philanthropy is about outcomes and about impact. And I think if we spend as much time as we do about the giving in measuring the outcome and the impact, because one of the things we learned while we were doing all our research was incredible amount of good work, but we don't review it. And when you don't review it, then you feel, oh, I've been with this school for 20 years. And we're thinking, okay, but after 5 years, then what has been the improvement? By 6th year, maybe you should have exited that school and looked at another school because you've created that impact. So I think very synergistic with the words of philanthropy comes 2 words, which is impact and outcomes, and constant measuring of them. Thanks very much. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. And I look forward to participating for the rest of these sessions.
Thank you, Ronnie, for your very thoughtful remarks around philanthropy. And thank you for sharing the Swades story. Amazing to see the success and the impact that the foundation has had in, I believe, less than 10 years. During this time of crisis, as grassroots organizations and rural communities are suffering the deepest impact of the pandemic, there is truly a greater need for the Swades 360-degree approach to development. Thank you again for joining us this morning. Staying on the topic of philanthropic engagement in India for building, supporting, and sustaining grassroots organizations, I would like to introduce our final segment, which is a discussion on what India needs now, on-the-ground update and opportunities for philanthropic engagement. As we all know, India has been ravaged by the deadly second wave, not only medically with the infection, but also through millions more suffering from hunger, financial distress, and just basic livelihood assistance. And this issue is more pronounced in villages and rural parts of India. We have an incredible panel who can help us clearly understand the situation on the ground and what it means for philanthropic engagement in the immediate and medium to long term. As part of this discussion, we have Naghma Mulla, CEO of EdelGive Foundation. Naghma has also kindly agreed to play a dual role of panelist and moderator. We also have Zarina Screwvala, co-founder and managing trustee of the Swades Foundation, and Atul Satija, CEO of GiveIndia and founder of The Nudge. Naghma, Zarina, and Atul, welcome. Let me kick off this discussion by asking the first question, and then Naghma would request you to moderate the discussion going forward. So grassroots organizations have been critical to COVID response in India, especially when it comes to the last mile. What are the current challenges that these organizations are facing, and what can philanthropy do to strengthen the capacity of these organizations? Naghma, maybe you can start, and followed by Zarina and then Atul.
Yeah. Thank you, Ashish. Thank you. A deep gratitude for being invited for such a fantastic discourse. And always great to be with Indiaspora. And welcome, Zarina and Atul. I'll just respond to the very apt question that was put out by Ashish here. But I think in the last 2 years, let me just come through the point. We've always heard that the development sector in India is more intuitive, maybe less strategic, less processized, but more empathetic. And we will have to build a lot of capacities. My personal take is in the last 1.5 to 2 years, we've actually busted a lot of that myth. because in March, this entire sector rallied and turned around its processes, its people, and every bit of resources that they had to ensure that the worst affected people did not suffer. And that happened in front of our eyes within hours and not days. When a sector has undergone this kind of a churn to respond to the need, I think we have to first acknowledge that there are some incredible processes, but even more incredible people that are at the helm of what is going on there. I think that has been out. The grassroots have suffered. They have suffered because they have worked nonstop. There's an incredible amount of mental trauma. There is a trauma of having program funding being withdrawn into relief funding. There is less amount of funds for admin, while all the time having a first-hand interface with the worst affected, whether it is through the black fungus that is the most recent of the traumas that they had to face, or the migrant walk, or the food security, or the oxygen crisis. So in that sense, the grassroots are overwhelmed, but have still not given up. They are still at it, and they are still going to go at it. So yes, the grassroots have taught us a lot. They have challenged a lot of what we presume they know and do not know. And also, if we hear clearly, there is a set of capacities that we have the opportunity now to help them build. And here is where I think philanthropy plays a very, very important role. To come again very sharply down to the point where I see philanthropy does not solve global problems. Philanthropy incubates solutions for global problems. Philanthropy is a catalyst to find those solutions. And I think the philanthropists of this country and the philanthropists of the world, if they can now really use all their resources and their absolutely brilliant intent to fund the risk requirement of this sector, to fund the mundane, boring costs that are going to enable these grassroots to go a long, long way ahead, that would be incredible. I think we need to listen to what is the requirement of the people. That is again going to be a habit that we will have to work over, because so far we have had an idea of what it will take to either transform education or bring relief or whatever, but there are some fantastic models that are coming up. So listening, empathizing with the people, coming up with very pro-people and long-term solutions in dialogue instead of as mandates. I think philanthropy has a lot of positive role that we can play, and we have a brilliant opportunity to rise up to the occasion and own, how the future is written in terms of solutions. So I'm really kicked in that sense that out of this trauma, we actually have a chance to build something that was better than before if we give ourselves a chance. And personally, EdelGive is very, very, very kicked to be at the cusp of launching Grow, which is about funding 100 organizations in this country, all small and medium, for their core costs. And the way the philanthropic sector has responded to this, it's very heartwarming, and I'm sure we are at the right track. That's been something that I'm very pleased about. But Zarina, as I answer what Ashish said, I think you have been a role model for many years. And we've been seeing not only your work with Swades, but also all the work that Ronnie and you have been involved. As we see what's going on right now, what do you think are the immediate needs that are emerging out of the second wave of COVID? And what do you think are the areas which require attention in India right now?
So I think, Naghma, I really agree with you. This COVID has come as a terrible disaster, but it has also opened up huge opportunities, okay? One of the outcomes that we're really working on is, can we rebuild our health systems to be far more robust at the grassroots, at the village level, at the tier 1, tier 2 town level, with equipment, with training, with all the money that's pouring in? Can it make a permanent change in the health systems of the country? Can we use this awful pandemic to come out stronger, to quote you? I think it has been at the forefront of Swades' thinking. How can we change fundamentally the grassroots health systems and infrastructure through the funding that's pouring in from COVID? So that's one aspect. The other aspect which Swades deeply believes, Naghma, and it's really helped us. So we never stopped. Like you said, we just pivoted. There was a problem and we pivoted. Yes, a lot of our people were right there in the field. We're a very odd animal. We're a grassroots execution foundation. So just very briefly to give you the one line to explain quite a complex organization is we want to create a model of development for rural India. And the model should be capable of lifting 1 million people out of poverty every 5 years, creating a system of sustainable rural transformation. That's sort of like our goal. Now, at the heart of that, Naghma, is our rural community. An empowered rural community is what helped us fight the pandemic, whether it was distributing food in 2,500 villages or a little less than that. Not all of them needed it. But at the heart of it, these trained communities, we call them village development committees, were working with our staff, which is 300 people, day and night, to make sure that messages were given. We were mentoring people who had COVID. We were checking, we were setting up isolation centers in the village itself. They were checking the migrants that came in. The work they did deserves Padma Shri after Padma Shri, really.
Absolutely.
I can't tell you, they put themselves out there. They've set up community kitchens, but this is because they were infused before the pandemic. For 1.5 years, we changed the way we worked, Naghma, and we made it entirely community-centric. Train the community to pave their own future, create their own pathways, and we train them multiple things. This one gave us a chance to test health, okay? We have like 700, more now, 1,000 community health workers who are totally trained in all health, and we work very closely with the government, very closely in collab. I think one of the things that we've really learned, Naghma, is ask for help. Don't do everything yourself, right? Collaborate. So in media, Ronnie and I are media people. It's like you can't make a film, direct a film, act in the film, be the DOP. You have to get the best of people who share. The main thing they must share is your passion and your vision. And then you can work out all the 100 issues you will have. So whether it is at this point, of course, I'm focusing on health. And the other one that we're really focusing on, Naghma, is livelihoods, because we need to rebuild a lot of systems. And unfortunately, where we work in Raigad, we have been swamped 2 consecutive years by terrible flooding. Entire villages have been wiped out, and we are rebuilding those villages. It's very heartbreaking to see our water systems, our toilets, everything is gone, Naghma. It's all gone.
But you said something very important, Zarina. Sorry,
just to conclude that.
Sorry.
We should focus on belief, yes, but rebuilding now. Rebuilding, even if it takes infrastructure, there is a tremendous need for that. Sorry,
No, I'm sorry I interrupted you. I actually got very excited by something that you said, which is when you said that, your community was actively participating, and not just participating, a lot of times leading. You also leading. Things don't happen just, as a quick response. There's some things that you've done right, because, there's no solution like community-owned solutions, right? If community owns it, it works. But can you give us a little more sense of how you did that? Because I think that is actually the golden.
So it is really the heart of the work.
Yes.
So we have a 4E strategy. I'll just tell you, it's engage with the community, empower the community, execute programs in collaboration with multiple stakeholders, and then exit. Now, this magical exit hasn't happened yet, huh? We're working on it. But to say that the heart of the model is what we call the Village Development Committee, which is something Swades has built. We did a lot of debating. Should we take an existing institution and build that and strengthen that? And in the end, we said we want an apolitical organization. We want an organization which is built entirely of volunteers that say, I want to do this for my village. 5 men, 5 women, 2 youth. That's the constituent. Okay. And then we have a whole lot of things where Naghma, the golden thing is, you need to make it difficult for the community. You don't have to just keep giving. You have to tell them, you do this, then we do that. You do this. So we have actually testing. We test their engagement levels. We test their ability to bring people together, to solve political problems, we teach them, but then they have to do it. That's at the heart. So they are able to solve problems on their own now. They have that can-do attitude. It's incredible. I mean, I'd really invite people to come and meet these. They're so inspiring. I wish they were talking instead of me. I mean, they talk 100 times better than me. And I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but that is the heart of Swades. And honestly, in the beginning, we were not doing it. We were really, we were giving a toilet, we were giving a cow, we were giving a goat, and take it. No, big mistake, Naghma. You're creating dependency. We have that line, rural empowerment. Okay, if I give you my Swades card, you'll have a very pretty card and it'll say rural empowerment. We were not doing that properly. Really, I'm telling that. My honest, one of the things I think we do a lot is we share our mistakes and lessons and pivots and change and tweak. This is the key. Don't keep giving unless the community is willing to earn it, because then they feel super proud. And then they own it. And then they are capable. Okay, I'll give you one example. So there was this village for 60 years, apparently, who was asking for a road from the government. Okay. So they formed the VDC and they were squabbling and there was a lot of political issues, but they formed the VDC. You won't believe, I went and visited one and a half or 2 months later. I can't remember where it was. I think it was Sudagar. And they told me, madam, and they were so proud. They were like literally showing off. They had got the government to get that road because they said the elections are coming up. We won't vote until you sanction our road. And they did it. And they got the road. The road was like the for arriving, So
that's so cool.
Once you really empower people with this can-do attitude, Swades is made up of 2 words, Swa and Des, my country. Swa se bane Des. That's what we believe.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you. And from communities to philanthropists back again. And Atul, welcome once more. I think we always knew of GiveIndia. We knew GiveIndia one as one of the early movers, the early speakers for good philanthropy, responsible philanthropy. But during COVID, for the last 1.5 years, I think what Give has been able to do has been outstanding. And you have been in the center of a lot of motivations for different kinds of philanthropists. I just begin with asking you what, according to you, are some of the things that you've seen as behavioral shifts for philanthropists during the last few months, and how do you see it going forward?
So Naghma, firstly, thanks for having me here. See, over the last 1.5 years since the first wave of COVID hit, we have seen close to about 1.5 million everyday donors come forward and donate. Just on GiveIndia, there are other platforms which also have a lot of donors who have come in. We have seen close to about 300 plus organizations who have come forward and donated. Like you said, in the 1.0 avatar of GiveIndia, we were always about everyday giving. Yeah. But during COVID and during disasters, it is almost, you feel morally sort of uncomfortable not taking resources when somebody is giving, even if it is not an individual giver, even if it's a philanthropist or a foundation. But we didn't know entering into this in the ICRF wave 1, COVID wave 1, that will continue doing it over the last 1.5 years or so. And it's been very, very interesting. We have overall over the last 16, 17 months now, about 1,000 crores is what we have sort of been able to see philanthropists and everyday donors give. Just for COVID response, counting wave 1 and wave 2.
Wow.
Which is way beyond what we thought we will end up sort of seeing as a response for the work. I think from a behavior standpoint, I haven't seen, unfortunately, a huge shift forward or sideways. It is more of what we have seen in smaller disasters also. Whenever there is an urgency on the ground and you kind of are able to feel the pain of a lot of other people who are less privileged. In this case, actually, nobody was not underprivileged in this case, right? Like the problem was inside the home of everyone. Yeah. So we saw generosity like never before. Everyone came forward and donated, from philanthropists to foundations to corporates to everyday donors across all segments in India and outside. We have never seen employees of global companies with no offices in India contributing money to India's sort of needs on the ground. I think what was unique to us this time, us as in India and the communities this time, is that the global media covered a lot of the need on the ground, just given that it was so grave. And I think that made a lot of people connect, especially the diaspora that moved to US in the last 20 years, made their money there, but they had not started thinking philanthropy yet.
Yeah.
Like Ronnie very rightly said, right? Like it seems like you put the word on a pedestal and you have to be at a certain stature in life to start giving.
Yeah.
I think one thing that definitely happened is that COVID accelerated that journey for a large number of people and made them philanthropists much early in their career, just given the scale of COVID and the devastation we saw. So that was a big shift. Most of the support that we saw largely came last year. It was a lot more humanitarian and some health. This year, obviously, it was a lot more health and humanitarian. And if you see way forward from here, a lot of humanitarian was food, dry rations, transport, benefit access kind of work, which is now starting to shift from immediate needs of today to this week, this month, this season, and this year. It is moving from dry rations and nutrition to kitchen gardens and nutrition gardens, moving from there to upskilling for revived job, the shift in jobs, bringing migrants back, reskilling back, job connections. So a lot of sort of shifts that happened because of COVID is what people are trying to readjust the dials for and get things back in shape.
Yeah.
The reality is that, look, the problem is so much bigger. We have lost 10 years of the progress we made in many, many, many communities across the country. And there is no one silver bullet, golden bullet that will come and solve the problem, right? The problem of poverty, problem of livelihoods, the problem of public health, the problems of like everything else linked to that, gender, for example. So many issues are very deeply interconnected that you need a very long-term commitment to now work deeply into this, right? Like people are looking for short fixes, saying, what can I do as a philanthropist or as a corporate or even as GiveIndia this year to solve the problem? And I think the wise thing to do here is to just brace yourself for a long-term journey of deeper commitment, more commitment, and like you said, more risk, because the solutions are not visible on the surface. Problems are visible on the surface and more than on the surface, but solutions are deeper, like Zarina said, right? Like work in every vertical in a community to really solve the problem.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that commitment, the ability to take the risk, support the nonprofits for the medium term for their models, partnering with other organizations to make impact happen. We had never seen giving collectives before at the scale we saw during COVID. And they're not the only ones, right? Ag Grants did a very good job. So many other funds have come together, collective giving programs have come, and they all need sort of support for next 5-7 years at a minimum to meaningfully make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you very much. I agree with you. Because when we were also conceptualizing and designing Grow and interviewing a lot of the grassroots organizations across the country, what we understood, and I think from small and large organizations, is there are those institutions that are even finding it difficult to pay their electricity bill. They're finding to meet the normal operating costs. So how does program even work effectively? Then programs start looking weak, and we have a system that is really growing weaker and weaker while we have more and more money coming on for XYZ mandates that look really good. But how does a brilliant plan sit on the back of a weak system? So there is so much that we have to work on as an ecosystem player, whether we are, in fact, I would go and say that maybe everyone doesn't have to be long-term, but between us, if we can mix the long and the short, the strategic and the non-strategic, but just make sure that the resources reach where they have to reach, with lesser worry on spillovers and more worry on, making sure the show goes on. Is I think a very, very important. That's why I appreciate this, the list that Indiaspora has come out with, because it throws spotlight on some of the brilliant people who've taken that risk, whether early or late, and who have rallied around causes and consistently rallied around causes. So they become very, very strong role models also. Zarina, before I pass it on to Sanjeev, if there are any, because you, like Ronnie also spoke a little bit about it, you were in this much, much earlier, and some words on you on really why did you start early from as an individual is what I would say, and what makes it good going forward as well. before we hand over to Sanjeev?
It's, as Ronnie said, it's so personal, right? It's something you just want to do or you don't want to do. I mean, what can you say about something like this? Either you just want to or you don't want to. But now, as Atul said, I mean, wow, I mean, 1 million people giving. I think everyone's, there are so many aspects to everything. A disaster like COVID has opened up the eyes of so many to the pain and suffering, because they too have felt that pain and suffering. As Atul said, it was in our homes. And we were privileged enough to be able to cope because we still had our jobs and we still had food to eat, So I think that all those stories also, we didn't like the foreign media talking about India in a very disparaging manner, but it did open up a lot of giving. Okay, so there are good things and bad things. It's a personal choice. But all I can say is, like Ronnie said, you don't need to have a lot of money. I do agree the word philanthropy sounds like, an old person with white hair sitting on a throne or something. I don't know. It conjures up the wrong image. I think the more young people give early, give small, give your time, give your expertise. You can give anything. You can give a smile. It's be involved with the world around you. Start with the local, start with small things, or start with your hometown, or start with an organization you trust. It could be anything, but give. There's a lot. This give is actually, you're really taking back a lot. I mean, it's the most.
Absolutely.
Naghma, we've done a lot in our lives, Ronnie and I, but these last 10 years, when almost, Share is very old, but we weren't so involved. This last 10 odd years have been very, very satisfying, the most satisfying time of my life.
Yeah,
the most happy time of my life. So I wish everyone that same happiness.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Atul, as well. Some incredible sharings from there. But this actually brings up what I'd like to just place as last words here, that yes, we need to give. Philanthropy. It doesn't have to wait. We don't have to be X old or X rich to be able to give, because giving back needs to start much earlier. Giving back, keeping in mind what is needed, very important. Taking that risk. There is no foolproof giving. There is no 100% success expected. I think philanthropy has to own up to the risk it needs to take. How beautiful would the world be if we were okay with making mistakes and okay with with tougher goals for ourselves? It would be great. And third is it is a humanitarian sector. It is a development sector. It takes brilliant human beings to become philanthropy leaders. It takes brilliant human beings to be grassroots leaders. And if we all work together, I think we have a fairly decent shot. If not immediately, then maybe gradually at least, to come to a semblance of what normalcy will look like for most of the people in this country. So thank you very much for being such brilliant co-panelists. And Sanjeev, over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Naghma. What a fantastic roundtable you led along with Zarina and Atul. I'm so glad that many of our speakers throughout the program have stuck around. And I do have a few closing questions. I'll start with Zarina. Then I'll move on to Anand, Anu, and Vikram, and I'll end with Atul and Naghma, if that's okay. So, Zarina, to you first. You and Ronnie both spoke, not just with great insight, but with tremendous passion about your philanthropic work. So, tell me, in 5 years' time, if you were to look into the crystal ball, where do you see yourself as philanthropists?
So, Sanjeev, what I hope that Swades can do is really, having created that model, create a learning document, share it widely, all our mistakes, all our pivots, all our successes across the whole 360, and at the core, how to empower a community. That's the core. And also, I would certainly hope that we've exited all 7 blocks that we're currently in. So it's high time. We're working out what it means to exit. Is it a chop? I don't think so. It will continue to have M&E systems of various very interesting things that we're developing, including awards and festivals. And so a lot of fun coming up. So I would hope that we've exited, and I hope we're now able to do 2 different geographies of 500,000 and 500,000. Right now we're at 500,000. So I want to be at the 1 million mark. I want to have exited the 500,000. Mangesh, our CEO, is listening to this. So this is what I hope for us. And I would hope that communities take this model up in micro levels, micro learning, each village at a time, taking up this for themselves. That's what I would dream of.
Thank you, Zarina. Well said and great insights. Let me turn to Vikram Khanna, our panelist from Singapore. Vikram, we've talked on a few occasions in the past, and as you know, Indiaspora's mission is to position the global Indian diaspora as a force for good. Now, a lot of this begins with diaspora philanthropy in their local communities, the give where you live philosophy, right? And so if you could give us a little bit of an overview of Indian diaspora philanthropy locally in Singapore, not just directed towards India, but in Singapore.
Well, I think there are Indian institutions in Singapore that are quite active. For example, the Singapore Indian Chamber of Commerce. They have pooled together a lot of philanthropic activities, especially during COVID times. Singapore also happens to have a lot of quite high net worth individuals from India. Originally from India, but now maybe Singaporean, who have various personal initiatives. And I think the Singaporean Indian, that means the original inhabitants of Singapore who happen to be Indian, they also have their own community-based, like the Malayali Association, the Hindu Endowment Board, and so on. They also have that. But I think one of the important things is the point I made a little earlier, is that people have also invested their skills. The IIM and IIT alumni, for example, have invested a lot of their capabilities. I mentioned supply chain management, but it also extends to other areas. For example, digital, promoting digital literacy, and so on. That has also happened. And I think this is very important, that the Indian diaspora has a lot of very wealthy people, but it also has far more highly skilled people. And I think any philanthropic effort should tap into people's skills as well. On giving where you are, on that broad issue, I just have one point to make. And that is that 3/4 of India's ultra high net worth individuals are in just 3 cities. That's Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore. As a result of this, I understand a lot of areas get left out. UP, Bihar, Orissa, Madhya Pradesh, the northeastern states, for example, they don't get their due in terms of philanthropic activity as much, and the remote tribal areas and so on. I think these are things that fall between the cracks. So I think philanthropists outside India probably have less geographical bias. So I think that could be an area where there could be more activity in the future. So yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Vikram. If I can turn it to Anand and Anu and bring them in. Both of you spoke about your evolution in the philanthropic journey, and now you're at certainly a much more sophisticated or more evolved stage in your philanthropy. But you talked about the challenges that you faced and the learning that you needed to imbibe when you were starting out. So, help us understand, and I'll go to Anand first and then to Anu. What resources did you use to learn when you were starting out on your philanthropic journey, or what attitudes did you find that you had to cultivate to become a more effective philanthropist?
Thanks, Sanjeev. And I think I'd go to what Desh mentioned yesterday as one of the best learnings on how to sort of evolve on all of these things. So we started out by saying we have this model about how we want to help small entrepreneurs and small businesses. But when we started to put it out, it was very clear that that's not what they were looking. So engaging with the community, and after we got some acceptance of people at least willing to listen to our story, it was much easier because people came forth with their ideas and suggestions that then were much easier to incorporate. So when you start doing things where you are doing things that are jointly developed with the community that you are supporting, it is a lot better than trying to just come from outside and say, no, we're going to do this for the community, because our knowledge of what the needs are is always limited.
Thanks, Anand. Agreed. And Anu, Any thoughts from you on this subject? Is Anu? Yes, I do see Anu. Anu, you'll have to unmute and come on video, please.
Sure.
Yeah, thank
Sure.
you.
I cannot start the video, but I'm on.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah,
and we can see you as well.
So, okay, so I think I had to learn a bit of humility and realize I don't know many things and I have to learn from others. Introspect, how can I do things differently than always demanding that others change? And realize how change is so difficult for me, and to expect others to always change the way I expect is not the right thing. So these kind of things become more understanding, accepting, less reactive has helped me.
Wise words, especially words that I think people who have had tremendously successful corporate careers like yourself have had and then are moving into the philanthropic space. Let me turn to Atul and then to Naghma. Atul, tell us a little bit about how GiveIndia has scaled. You know, GiveIndia is now among the leading conduits for philanthropic activity in India. But what challenges did you face in your push to scale GiveIndia from point A to where it was, what it was when you took it over, to now point B, where, like I said, it's one of the leading entities in India?
So Sanjeev, I think there are two different paths to the challenges we had to go through this journey. One was very internal, which was to redesign the organization for technology, for products, for thinking online and thinking scale, which was like an internal realignment of talent, aspiration, goal setting, product visions, and stuff like that. Took us actually close to a year to get that right, moving it from Bombay to Bangalore and sort of just changing the culture. I think the second part of that was more outside in, which was very COVID induced, that we moved from being an everyday giving, retail giving platform to actually becoming a full service giving partner for individuals and organizations. I think the second part is something that we are still at the early stages of. Over the next 1 year, we'll see Give evolve from being an everyday giving platform to being a partner for giving for India and Indians, individuals and organizations globally. And that journey is something that we're just starting on, knowing that with COVID, there's a lot of desire to contribute meaningfully to India. We want to convert that to a long-term commitment to participate in India's needs. So just going through that journey, which again will meet orbit shifting the aspiration once again building the talent that you require sort of to service the need of organizations. Sort of capacity building and go-to-market activities is what we have to invest in now.
It's been a lovely journey to watch and have a ringside seat for Atul already in the past, and it looks like there are incredibly exciting times ahead as well for GiveIndia. Naghma, I'll bring you in on a topic that I know that you are very passionate about and that you spoke about, and that's people involved in the philanthropic space, in the philanthropic sector. People who move other people's hearts and minds. You have a column that you write called North Stars, and you profile various folks in the philanthropic realm in that column on a regular basis. Tell us a little bit about why you started that and who are some of the incredible folks that you profile.
Oh, thank you. It's one of my most favorite things that I'm doing for the last 6-7 months. No, the idea emerged from the fact that we work in the humanitarian sector. It's been such a difficult time because we all have to rally around and firefight, and we are, and when I say we, almost see people like me are 2 degrees, 3 degrees away from, where the crisis actually unfolds. But there are people like Anshu of Goons. There are people like Ashish from Jan Sahas. There is Flavia Agnes from Majlis. There are these people who have taken on the mandate of addressing grief, crisis, and disasters of all possible kinds on a human basis. They have put their lives out there. They have also, their whole families have also put their lives out there. And to call this anything that is a sacrifice, or there is any element of that, would be actually demeaning what they have chosen to do with their lives. I think the whole North Stars piece came from the fact that the least we can do is recognize the human behind the massive efforts we see. We all run institutions, and we all have a lot we give to running institutions, but somewhere we need to also pause and recognize the human cost of running the work that India is proud of and this country is proud of. So it started honestly with Anshu. He is a dear friend, and I have been a huge admirer of what Poonj does. And I'm now on my 11th piece. I had thought I will write 12 completely. And I have written about, I've chosen to write one about those who have seen work, and also whose work I have been able to see unfold, but also I know them personally. Each piece has changed me, influenced me individually. And I hope that those who read also get a glimpse of some outstanding people that actually move around with us, and we miss them because we are seeing the work and not them. So that's what North Stars is all about.
Thank you, Naghma. And Indiaspora has been privileged through our Chalo Give program, for which we did COVID relief both in the United States and in India over the past couple of years, to partner with outstanding organizations like your own EdelGive, like Atul's GiveIndia, and indeed Anshu's Goonj. That has been, a great privilege and learning for us, and hopefully has been impactful to people in the US and in India. But this has been such a wonderful program. I mean, our speakers, our panelists were also insightful, also passionate. I hope that the attendees, like I did, took away a lot from these sessions. And I want to now close this program formally. Thank you all for speaking, participating, our jurors, for helping us put this list together, and congratulate the philanthropists once again on this list as well. Thank you all for being here. And with that, we end this program.